You kind of call yourself couples therapists for business partners?
Yes, it's something I often get called by clients, sort of their marriage counselor, as it were.
Is communicate more the most garbage advice that you can give someone?
Yeah, communication is a huge theme. Definitely, it's not just more. Ultimately, a lot of it comes down to how to listen effectively as well.
Best friends starting a company, what is the survival rate?
When the partnership's strained, it can slow things down. It can obviously bring about slower decisions, less output.
Has a founder ever cried in a session with you? Okay, so finding a co-founder might be more difficult than finding a spouse. One of the reasons is that you might be spending more time with your co-founder than with your husband or wife. And for that reason, when co-founders split up, there's 20% chances that the entire company might shut down within the next 18 months.
And that's why today we're chatting to Nicki Coe, who coaches co-founders, and she's on a mission to change that horrible stat of 65% of startups failing due to co-founder fallout. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, let's dig in. So, Nicki, thanks so much for joining Building Great Tech. Amazing to have you on the show. And as we had a chat before, you're working with startups of different stages, right? All the way from the start to exit. And you kind of call yourself couples therapists for business partners. Is that very similar?
Yes, it's something I often get called by clients, sort of their marriage counselor, as it were. And I feel like, isn't it, something we can all relate to, that running a business together is a very intense dynamic. And in a way, you kind of got the marriage and the business in a way is like the baby, isn't it, that you're both trying to nurture and protect and look after. And it's a work that I think is really important. It's come from my own experience as a co-founder. I also run a branding agency, and just saw firsthand how when that partnership is strong and in sync and aligned, the business can just fly. Right? You can make decisions faster, you can grow faster together, you feel more creative, you feel more energized, more motivated, more decisive, all those kind of practical and emotional things. But when the partnership's strained, it can do the opposite, right? It can slow things down. It can obviously bring about the weight and drain of stress and tension, slower decisions, less output. So I just sort of thought there's such a gap here to really support founders with that and see the partnership as an asset in the business. Right? How do we maximize that to really impact the bottom line, but also, our energy and our joy and sleep, I suppose, as well, day to day.
Makes sense. And I wanted to ask you, because I was reading a lot about sort of reasons why couples split up. And I read somewhere that 50% of them split up because of communication problems. But is communicate more the most garbage advice that you can give someone?
That's a good question.
It's a good question. I suppose, yes. It's funny. There's obviously a lot of different themes that I work with co-founder teams on, but communication just underpins all of it. Because even if perhaps there's tension around long-term vision, like they can't align on what that is or it's changed or something, the tension really comes because you can't communicate on that vision. So aligning it's one thing, but then being able to communicate about it is really kind of what ties it together. So communicate more for me is just part of the puzzle. It's really about understanding your different communication styles, your habits, how to align those. And really, I often say to people that being a co-founder is one of the best or the biggest sort of self-development projects we'll ever undertake, because really to be the best co-founder, you need to commit to being the best team player, which means knowing your patterns, your habits, your communication styles, tendencies, and actually learning how to improve those, blend them together. And ultimately, a lot of it comes down to how to listen effectively as well. A huge piece of the puzzle. So communication is a huge theme, but definitely it's not just more. It's sort of really understanding what your current styles and patterns are, how to improve those, how to align those, and then do more of it.
And what would you say is the biggest challenge you see between pairs of co-founders? Actually, are you working with just pairs, or does it go to like bigger teams where there's like three, you got a throuple going on kind of thing? Or is it
Yeah,
mostly
definitely. I
like
do work.
duos?
Yeah, those pairs. There's definitely more pairs. I'd say it's probably sort of maybe 80%,
Okay.
but definitely I work with some threes and some fours. And I guess ultimately the wrapper for what I do is co-founders, but effectively my skill set is helping build effective high stake relationships. So that can apply to, boards, leadership teams, whatever. But co-founders is kind of where I really have my passion for, but that expands to different sort of team contexts. But the biggest issue I see is a very tricky question because there's so much to talk about. But I suppose it really comes down to, this maybe is a bit vague, but I'll start there because I think it's important to say that what I see happen is that the business has evolved, but the partnership hasn't evolved to keep up.
Wow.
So when they start out, they might have obviously they've set out the roles, the vision, how to make decisions, all that kind of the foundational stuff, but they've not updated that as the business has grown. So they're running a business that is now here whilst operating with a partnership that's here. And that's sort of where that tension starts. And I said that can come out in things like misaligned roles, the vision, the finances, decisions, lots of components within that. But that's sort of the general pattern I see and what starts to cause that friction point.
That's really interesting.
I love that. You mentioned the misalignment of roles. Can you kind of tell us more about this? Because it's really fascinating for me.
Yeah. So I guess, to be sort of perhaps oversimplified here, but there's often teams that come together, like me and my own co-founder. So we run a branding agency, and one of us is sort of more of the creative one, and one of us is more of the biz dev and strategy one, which is me. So naturally, on paper, there's potentially quite clear roles from the get-go, right? You own that bit, and I'll own that bit, and together we can be the dream team. The first challenge I see with roles is that when teams start out together, again, this is from my own experience as well, you want to do everything in some way together because that's kind of like part of the fun and the adventure, and you want to be involved in all the lessons and the wins and the challenges together. So almost, I say challenge one is actually co-founders don't redefine that sort of balance of autonomy and teamwork. It gets to that point of expansion where you can't do the same amount of things together because it's just not effective. But there's not a clear discussion of actually, okay, right now collaboration is really important, but that now looks like I'm going to join the end of your team meeting because that's where I want to hear the updates and the summaries, but I don't need to be there for all the discussions about X, Y, Z. Or I love to be involved in that client project, but actually my skill set's here, so why don't we change how that workflow lays out? That sort of example. So kind of changing the balance of autonomy and teamwork with roles as you grow. And I think as well, point two is that sometimes co-founders can get siloed. So again, like that's your skill set and that's mine, and that has real value. But ultimately, again, depending on the business and the size of the business, and if there's a team, ultimately you shift from being a founder to being a leader. That's a very different skill set and a very different role. So within that, again, it's really thinking about actually not only has the role evolved, but who are you as a leader of a business, not just a founder of a business? What team culture are you building? How does your partnership mirror the culture you want to see in the team and in the business? So checking on the practicalities of the role, but also actually long-term, what best serves the business. And a question that often gets put to the side is actually like, what do I enjoy doing? What do I want to do? Yeah. In that siloed piece, you kind of get put as being in charge of the sales or the tech, for example. But actually, I think joy, creativity, connection are huge parts as well of like what the day-to-day role is and how engaged you then feel as a co-founder of that business.
And
wow, that's like so interesting, the like transition from founder to leader, because you might think that those things are quite, to start up as a founder, you kind of like want to like lead something or change something or move in a direction that hasn't happened before. So to then think to then actually like look at that and go, okay, that's actually a very different role to leadership and the managing like of others. Like, I'd be interested to understand, how does that kind of play out the role of managing others and yourself and your business partner, like within the kind of world of a changing business.
Is that also like, sorry, is that a question?
I'm not sure if it was very clear.
I heard a question.
Oh, you did?
Okay, go on then, Nicki.
No. I was just going to say, I feel like, as you say, when you say it out loud, it sounds something that's quite obvious, but actually in practicality, I don't think people think about it until they're shown that challenge, or it's kind of shown to them as being something that's potentially impacting the business and the team. And I think a lot of it comes down to, as you say, like, to be a founder, you want to lead an idea. And I love how you phrase that. But I think, and I say this with kindness, in some ways, to be a successful founder, and by successful, I mean to scale a business, sort of using that metric, you need to be a little bit, selfish is a harsh word, but you need to be quite driven and focused and determined, and almost prioritize your opinions and beliefs over potentially what you're told by the people around you. So I feel like the mindset shift from that founder to leader is actually kind of, in a way, the challenge that I see is, as a founder, you have to believe, ultimately, with variations in that, but that your vision and your opinion is true, like, will get you there. But as a leader, you have to adapt to almost employ people that you think are better than you, that are smarter than you, and that actually said you're there to still hold that ultimate vision to account. But that relinquish of control, that change of opinion and voice in the mix, can often bring up some challenges for people of, I guess, their sense of, like, well, value, I suppose, as well, and contribution to the business, and how that unfolds can be really interesting to sort of observe and support as a coach.
I love that you said, actually, I was going to ask you, is that really about letting go of control when you're transitioning from a founder to a leader? Is that what it is, like, mostly to kind of be able to let it go? And also, like you said, I love what you said, that you're hiring people better than yourself. So kind of like, that could be a struggle, because some people might think, okay, if I hire somebody who is better than me, maybe they will, take my space, like take my sort of position in the future. So there's a lot of going on, I think, internally then in that time. And also I wanted to ask you, does it change, does the dynamic between, co-founders and then maybe CEOs, as they kind of transition to different job titles, and as the company grows from the beginning to, let's say, exit, like, where are those areas that the most you see problems?
I think to answer your first piece there about control, I would say this is probably a very coachy response, so excuse if this sounds a little bit cringe, but it's not about necessarily letting go of control. It's just seeing how control changes by definition as you kind of get to that level. So the control you have is over perhaps some of those longer term, bigger decisions, rather than day-to-day execution. So I think just the form of control changes. And a huge piece that I work with teams on there is actually, I mentioned it earlier, but I think it's important to expand on here, is that the control you have, as I said, isn't as direct, but it comes about in terms of even more so, the dynamic of you as a leadership team. Like, I sort of do some work with supporting culture consultancies that go into businesses, and the co-founders say, we want to build a team culture that is collaborative, open, honest, really fun. And then they're like, that's not the vibe between you guys. Yeah, exactly. All of those really unique values in the business. But the co-founders don't have that relationship between themselves. So they're kind of like, well, how can you expect a team to honor those values if you don't demonstrate them between yourselves as a team? So again, kind of being the mirror to say, well, if you want to build a strong, aligned, engaged team that will deliver this vision for you, then who do you need to become now as leaders to actually support that? So I think that's a really important piece. And I guess to tap into the trend of personal branding, I often ask, like, what's the personal brand of your partnership? Like, how do people perceive you as a team? Because that has a huge impact internally, but also for investors, for the marketing, for press. So that's a really important piece as well. And part of that, it's not control, but it's kind of knowing what you can influence that actually directly impacts the business and the team. And then in terms of sort of some of the key challenges that I see, I guess, from the startup phase to the sort of scale up and exit. So was that your question? Kind of the key phase, key challenges throughout that journey?
Yeah, correct. Yeah. At which bits you can see the most friction between the co-founders?
It's almost, I'd say, sort of from the get-go, the energy, momentum, excitement, slight naivety actually is a strength. To be like, great, we're going to go for this. And then I'd say the first sort of not challenge, but I guess the first point at which there's some reflection needed and change needed tends to be about the end of year one. When you're like, okay, we're actually doing this now. Is it working? Is the vision unfolding as we thought it would? Do we feel engaged? Are we getting compensated in the way that we thought we would as well, financially, but also in terms of your sense of, motivation, engagement, that sort of thing? So kind of year one. And then I would say it's potentially about year sort of 3 to 5, or when, if it's part of their model, when they're looking to sort of get that investment piece in. Because again, that switch up of going, oh, okay, so this is the next level now, and perhaps there's more pressure, responsibility, there's more metrics in play. And I think it's that point when you start to see a real return on the business, whilst that's really exciting, it also brings a pressure for what comes next and maintaining that momentum to keep growing, if that makes sense. So again, that's a good point to think, to revisit, roles, visions, decision, all those sort of foundational things. And then from there, I would say that the next point, again, depending on the business, would be that scaling of a team. Like all those points I just mentioned about how do you actually become a leader? What's the team culture? Who are they? And then, that kind of exit piece. Now, I do work with teams that are going through exit either intentionally and amicably, or I also work with teams where there's more of a breakup situation playing out as well. And actually some teams that I start to coach do end up deciding that either one of them or potentially both of them will leave. And I'm obviously don't want to scare people by saying that that's necessarily what's going to happen or that it's the right choice. But I think, well, sometimes it's, I've definitely seen cases where people hang on to situations, partnerships or businesses that actually over the long term can be quite consuming and perhaps very different from kind of the life and business that they really want to build. So it can be a hard work for them and for me, but sometimes showing the light that actually maybe this isn't right as well, I think is equally as important as helping them build, kind of the long-term vision and deliver on that too.
Well, that's quite a responsibility for you to hold. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, there's a lot of contracting up front of saying, okay, if there's quite a lot of conflict or tension at play here, what are you looking to get out of the coaching space? How do we feel, respond in our sessions, but also ultimately with the outcome if, a breakup does become part of this process? And I work with a lot of partners. So I have lawyers that I work with, financial advisors, mediators, all sorts that I kind of bring in as and when needed to support that situation. And ultimately, if there is a place where conflict gets to a point of it looks there's going to be a potential split, sometimes depending on the situation, I will then say that I don't feel like I can show up professionally and add value in the same way by supporting both of you now, because obviously I'm conscious there's different interests at play here. So then between us that will change and potentially I'll bring in another coach to support the other co-founder, or sort of that support would change to kind of give them what they would need to then navigate that effectively, because it can be a very difficult situation to process.
Fascinating.
And has a founder ever cried in a session with you?
Yes. Yes, definitely. It's something I remember when I've sort of been doing this for nearly 6 years now, and I remember the first time that someone cried and trying really hard to hold the space whilst thinking, oh my God, what have I, like, making it kind of about me, like, what have I said? Should I have asked that question? How can I help them? Almost, I think it's as a human, you want to support, but also, help address whatever's caused that emotional response. But I feel like now my response to that potentially is a little bit different, and being like, well, if there's something that needs to be released, then perhaps this is the space to do it. I'm here for all of the emotions that you want to share. So yeah, my response to it has changed, but it definitely still happens.
Interesting. And it's, let's say, best friends starting a company. What is the survival rate?
Oh, I don't know in terms of like different dynamics, to be honest.
Yeah.
I feel like, so me and my co-founder were best friends. We met through work originally, and then sort of became really good friends when we left work and then started the agency together. And I feel like I work with a lot of co-founder teams that have all started a business because they were best friends. And I do feel like there's real strengths to that, in terms of you come to the business with mutual trust, respect, a real sense of who each other are as people. Like you know them, and you feel safe, and you get joy in their company. I also find with best friends that there is a real how do I phrase this? People really underestimate the motivation of also wanting to win for someone else. So if you run a business with a best friend or with a spouse, then you want to win for them as well. I think that's really empowering, and it's hard to sort of measure or articulate in some ways, but I think that can be really powerful. Also, perhaps you feel more safe to share sort of the good bits, the bad bits, all the bits in between, with a friend. But I also think those things have the flip side, where sometimes I see the boundaries can just be quite blurred between sort of the best friend and the business partner mode. And in a way, that shared motivation to win for each other can also be a pressure. It's kind of has two sides to it. But I'm not sure on the rate, but that's sort of what I see as the general pros and cons of the best friend model.
No, I think that makes sense. I think any situation has a pros and cons, right? Hey guys, we're really hoping that you're enjoying this episode so far. And if you are, please like, subscribe, and follow. And if you really want to know more about who we are and what we do, go to buildinggreattech.com. Now let's go back to the episode. Let's talk for a second about the sort of warning signs of, like, let's say we're running a business, we have a co-founder, what's the first signs in your experience that we should start addressing something?
I guess, like, what are those triggers that might make someone, like a team, reach out to you, or do people just come along and go, actually it would be really helpful to have a coach? Or is it like there is one trigger? It's probably a number of those things, I'm assuming.
Yeah, it's definitely a bit of a mix. I feel the general trigger is that there's a feeling there's a lot of things being unsaid.
Okay.
That kind of sense, like both nodding, aren't you? It's like, yeah, that kind of feeling that, like, there's something here that I'm not seeing. And I don't yet know if it's an argument or if there's tension brewing, but I just feel like for some reason we're now not in sync. We're not on the same page. And that can vary from things that, I guess the potentially more amicable side of that is that I get teams coming to me that have been through what I call a stress hangover. So if they've just fundraised, for example, that's been a real pressure, and it's gone well, and they're kind of looking at how to execute that funding successfully. That's been a big process that perhaps they've not connected on a human level, of being like, that was really tough, wasn't it? Like, we did it, but that was difficult, and it's changed the business, it's changed our relationship, it's changed a lot, and I feel like they need to connect on that. So kind of what's being unsaid is more almost coming back to sharing some of those sort of human and relational pieces. So that's more kind of the amicable unsaid things potentially. And then I think some of the more sort of conflict end of those unsaid things can be a bit deeper things, sort of like building resentment potentially, and that can come in lots of different forms, from different perspectives of workload or output, commitment, power dynamics, all sorts of things. But it can vary. But I think that, the unsaid, I always say, if you think there's things being unsaid and you don't feel like you can voice them, that's when there's a fracture that sort of needs to be looked at to try and rebuild that bridge.
That's so fascinating. I think that's where there is an advantage. If you're in a closer relationship, you can probably have those unsaid conversations, like with a best friend, you can air those things a little bit easier. And where in the professional world, and you said about some people's different kind of communication styles, they could be really quite different. That's fascinating. I would be like, I don't know what you've got on the question lined up, but I would love to know like what it was that got you kind of into this space, and how did you kind of come into the world of coaching, like co-founder specifically?
So I guess going back a step further to sort of give that the full story, I used to work in media, advertising in London, loved it, but always wanted to work for myself more, to be honest, just for the adventure of it. There was no deep mission or amazing idea. I just always wanted to have stories to tell and feel like I've, sort of lived a life well, as it were. So had loads of ideas of businesses to start, things to do. None of them worked. And then working in media sales, I always was with different people and loved people, always loved people from when I was a child. Did psychology at school, always found that relationship and connection really interesting. So I decided to do a diploma in life coaching alongside working full time, and loved it. And then, me being me, I thought I'm going to quit my job and start a coaching practice. So I did. Why not? And it started really broad. So I did people that wanted coaching for kind of health, lifestyle, sort of career goals, business goals. I intentionally wanted a real mix to see what am I most drawn to and where could I potentially have most impact. And then I actually, about sort of 3 or 4 months in, it wasn't very long, I actually felt quite lonely. I'd gone from being in a really like high energy media environment that probably is overstimulating to essentially working alone and meeting clients. I was still growing a business, so it was pretty quiet. So I felt really lonely, and actually the stars aligned, and Scarlett, my co-founder, she'd had a natural change in sort of her life, and we spoke about building an agency together for years after a few glasses of wine, thinking we could do this for ourselves. Why are we doing it for other people? So the stars aligned, and we started the branding agency, which is called Luna and Lion, and I loved it. And I actually loved, for years, I was sort of coaching founders. Then it sort of gradually became more founder focused alongside the agency, because obviously I was growing a business, so it made sense to mirror that in who I was coaching. And then about 3 years into running the agency, Scarlett and I just hit a point, I suppose I touched on earlier, of saying we're not new anymore, and we're not new. Like, how do we redefine what we're doing here, why we're doing it? We'd also both gone through the pandemic, breakups, babies, house moves, the whole, loads of life changes that actually we hadn't really reflected in our partnership and how we wanted to show up and why we wanted to build the business. So we tried to have a few conversations of how to reconcile that vision and I guess get a new motivation for what we were doing. And I'll be honest, those conversations were really hard, because she's one of my closest friends, and that conversation is emotional, financial. It's about your career, about your ego as well, obviously comes into the mix. And it was just, you could sense that feeling of, the more we both tried to make that conversation work, the more pressure it put in it, and the more it just started to instantly become quite emotional. And then it is hard to have those objective conversations. So I thought, there must be someone I can try and bring in, even just for me, to help me process that and understand, who do I want to be as a co-founder? How do I show up? How do I do that? So I looked for a coach with co-founder expertise. And of course, there are lots of coaches that work with founding teams and leadership teams, but I really wanted someone who was or had been a co-founder that could just bring that sense of relatability to the situation, because it's unlike any other relationship I've ever had. Couldn't quite find what I was looking for, and just had that gut feel, as I'm sure you can both relate to, that feeling of like, oh, I think this is what I'm supposed to do. So I just followed the thread, and I sort of reached out to people I know that are co-founders as well, and just did some research calls and said, would love to understand, what are your key pain points being co-founder? What do you love about it? What would you be looking for in terms of help with the partnership, also with the business? So did loads of research calls, and then sort of thought there's actually really a demand here for this to be, treated as an asset in the business and to really be given its attention. So it kind of went from there, and then it's evolved into coaching practices, I've got resources, I do workshops, partner with accelerators to kind of help them create teams. And I it's a big statement to end on, but I think especially even more so in the world of AI, human relationships can be what really differentiate a business and ultimately are what we can't outsource. So more and more, I think people are kind of recognizing the importance of actually having those partnerships. And yeah, it's come from my experience of actually this is why it matters, and the desire to really solve it for myself more than anything, which we did. We did solve it. We're together and working really well. So worked out.
I love that. It's amazing that you came up with your kind of product offering from a personal experience and challenge that you wanted to come over. I think the best tech is actually done like that. When you experience a problem, you understand the problem yourself because you're kind of living it, experiencing it, and then actually kind of create an offering for it. You had a point that you wanted to make on the AI thing.
No, actually, no. Before we go to AI, I wanted to ask you, when you in your practice, what is the most challenging thing that you find for yourself?
No, good question.
What I didn't quite anticipate when I shifted going from sort of one-to-one coaching to more of the team coaching. I do still do a lot of one-to-one coaching, but obviously co-founders by nature, that involves a group environment. I firstly didn't anticipate the energy it demands from me to not only observe, I'm now observing two people and their dynamic. So I'm observing three things rather than one. So that definitely can be a challenge, and just mentally and physically to actually do that job effectively. And of course, by nature, if there is tension and upset and hurt and conflict and anger and all those things in that dynamic, I've had to really train myself to observe it but not be attached to it. And it's really hard because I'm someone that by default lives life by my heart. I'm definitely more a heart than a head person. So if someone feels something, I feel like I can feel it too, which in some ways makes me a great coach because I'm intuitive and I can really pick up on that. But it's definitely been a process of learning how to observe, sort of direct, question, support, but also know that those are not my feelings to hold. And ultimately the outcome of that dynamic is not my responsibility. Like, I am just there to create space, to ask the questions, to support. So there's definitely been times when I've found it really hard to care the right amount. I suppose is a lazy phrase, but it's probably how I would describe it. Because naturally as well, I'm someone that people to me, what make life special. I want people to, I want people to be happy. So if I see someone that's not in that place, it's been a really interesting journey for me to hold that and kind of meet them where they're at, but not absorb that.
Love that.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Love that. Beautiful. And because you touched a little bit on AI, I wanted to ask you, because I know a lot of people these days using, ChatGPT as their psychologist kind of, we all using it. I mean, I tried to use ChatGPT for health advice, which was not a great idea. But I wanted to ask, what's your view on people actually using AI as a alternative support in their relationships?
Yeah, because you really beautifully touched on some very unique human traits, which I do think is kind of being forgotten about and a bit missed within the industry, and all the conversations around AI and where it's going, and it's going to be this amazing thing. But you're talking about human feelings and emotion, and that is all completely void in the digital thing that is AI. And so yes, interesting point, but I just wanted to pick up on those two very different things. And I think a lot, the people building that technology are maybe missing that special uniqueness that we as individual humans have and offer each other and the world. So I'm waffling, I forget what my point is, but
It's all valid. It's totally valid, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's the idea, isn't it, that as you say, like I definitely see that they can, I guess with the work I do, coexist and hopefully strengthen each other, where I interestingly find that actually I'm getting more and more people find me through ChatGPT,
Okay.
which is really interesting. And this is just my hypothesis. But what I think is happening is people don't use Google, for example, to search things like my co-founder and I are arguing, what do I do? They're looking up, they're looking for like factual answers, information, resources, things to absorb. But whereas they use ChatGPT to have a conversation, so they will ask things like, my co-founder's being a right pain in the ass. What do I do? Or that they're using it for kind of more of those potentially as well. I think questions that feel private, or that they're kind of just intrigued to sort of be curious about and get some deeper insight from. And that's how people have found me, which I just find fascinating. But I think it makes sense. I think when you think it through, it makes sense. So I think for me and the work I do, my positive self wants to think that AI can be used to actually support people who are starting to think about that kind of work, give them some ideas of what to consider. Here's some questions to ask. Here's some things to think about, think about for yourself. Maybe what are your patterns, what's happening for you? And then when it comes to actually the relationship and the conversation, I firmly believe that needs to be human. But I think actually AI is a great way to help people get to that point, if that makes sense. Like the initiator of that work. I think about it a lot, because obviously none of us know the answer yet as to how it's going to unfold. But I think if AI can be used to help people be more inquisitive about their relationships, their communication, and support them in that self-reflection, I think that's positive.
And do you worry at all that AI could replace potentially the work that you do?
Yeah, it's something that I talk about a lot with other friends that are coaches, and obviously, again, none of us know the answer, so it's fun to chat about, isn't it? But I guess I'm going to be biased, and I'd like to think it will increase in the way that it is part of what I do. But I feel like, again, that I'm going to probably articulate this quite badly, but I think with time, that sense of human connection and the ability to communicate and build relationships will become a real advantage and skill set for people, because that's something, again, that cannot be replaced at the moment with the tech that we have. So actually, I'd like to think that maybe what I do in a way will shift from kind of focusing on helping address tension and build strong relationships to actually say, how can we even strengthen this more, that it's an asset in the business, that our relationship and our human skills and communication really serve us as a business and as an asset. So maybe the impact of the work will change. I'm open. Let's see how it unfolds, but that's my current sort of line of thought.
And how are you utilizing AI? Are you using it like much within your kind of work and sort of day to day? Is it supportive? Like, is it just a route in for new clients, or does it take a role?
Yeah, well, I've really, this year, especially these last 6 months, I've really tried to be open-minded and really test how I use it to not only streamline what I do, but try and enhance what I do. Like, how can it actually add value for clients? Being completely open, I don't use any AI tools for transcribing or like helping me take notes or that sort of thing. I have tried them in the past, but interestingly, it's back to my point just now, I found that they didn't capture what I see as a coach. They can't see when I sense someone has withdrawn, or their tone of voice has changed, or there was a pause that was a bit too long, or like it can't see that. So actually I stopped using it. I found it was ineffective, but I have tried. I tend to use AI more in the case of helping me create resources. So I've got loads of free, like they're free on the website, of helping people reassess roles and responsibilities, setting long-term vision, questions to ask when you're looking for a co-founder, a values exercise, all of those things. So I use it as a thought partner. So I will say, right, I'm creating a resource around roles. This is all the steps that I see. This is what I want the objective to be. What's missing? How could you enhance it? how could you lay it out, that sort of thing, which I find really helpful, because ultimately I'm sort of putting my creativity and expertise into it and helping it enhance what I create. So that at the moment is where I find it adds real value, but still exploring kind of how else I might use it in my practice, and also what clients I want from it as well, potentially. So yeah, work in progress.
Love it. Really resonated with me what you said about AI cannot capture those unspoken things. Because what we do, and we work with, testing products and how people react to products. Do they like them, don't like them? It's also very subtle, and you very often it's a body language more so than what people say. So definitely resonate with what you just said.
And some people might say something, but you can see they mean the opposite.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, exactly. I think it's those skills and those that make us human.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes they can get lost or downplayed, but they can make all the world of difference when we give them the space to actually be recognized. So
I'm very excited actually, because I think the human part of existence is going to be elevated. The importance of that part is going to be elevated in the next, hopefully, 5, 10, 20 years, because that's the bit that is difficult to be recreated by AI and machines, at least for now. I wanted to ask you, before we wrap up, if we sort of a bit of a practical question. Let's say we're having a little bit of a hard time with our co-founder. What would you say are the 3 practical things we can do every day when working with them to kind of nurture and improve that relationship?
Okay, great question. The 3 things. So the first one that comes to mind is, I often find that when co-founders come together, for a catch-up or your weekly meeting, whatever it might be, they in effect will just read out their to-do lists and they will just kind of share information with each other, when that could be shared on an email or on Slack or whatever. So when you actually come together with your co-founder, daily, weekly, whatever that cadence is, use that time to actually discuss, debate, ideate, brainstorm, like do things that only your 2 brains together can do. And not only does that make that time more effective and impactful, it also makes it far more connecting, more enjoyable, energizing. So I think the outtake there is not being lazy with your time together, actually using it effectively, because I think that happens a lot. And you both we all know the feeling of when you go to a meeting and you just say, that's what I'm doing this week, what are you doing? And you think, did that really need to be a meeting? So that's definitely one thing. The other thing I would say is, often, I guess, going back to that piece around what causes the tension or the initial red flag of things unsaid, I find that when people could try and resolve that, they'll have really thought through in their head of how to share something, like whether it's a bit of feedback or a challenge or whatever. But in their mind, the conversation is really clear. But I'm going to go to them and say, look, last week I thought that meeting threw me off guard. I wasn't happy with the result or that client or whatever. So in your mind, it's really clear of what you're going to say, how it's going to go. But people forget that effective communication is an exchange. It's not a monologue, and you cannot plan someone else's response. So if there's a big, and I use the word loosely, but if there's a big conversation to have, please let them know beforehand. Say, I'd love to get together, talk about that meeting last week. It felt a bit off for me. I don't know how you feel. I'd love to just chat it through and make sure we're all happy and all good. Give them that heads up, because what I find is when you don't, people can feel a bit caught off guard or a bit sidelined, and then you don't get the output that you want. But by having that, what I say is, not ironically, it's intentionally sort of overcomplicating it, but communicate about communicating. Say, like, I want to talk about this. Then you're kind of having that shared mission up front of like, yeah, great. Think about where you meet. If it's a deep chat, maybe don't do it in the office by the coffee machine. Like, just plan, like, what's the best context for this conversation? So, number 1, sort of having effective meetings, not sharing to-do lists. Number 2, having sort of shared permission and awareness for those deeper conversations. And number 3, I think people really quickly forget the importance of having fun together. It can quickly turn into things that feel like getting the job done, meeting those next targets, the pressure of investment. And of course, those things matter. And I'm not saying that all co-founders need to be good friends in that sense, but I think the ability to keep humor and fun and joy through things, even when they can feel pressurized or difficult, is very underrated as a tool for connection and stress relief and motivation and all those things. So I think never dismiss the importance of enjoying it, I suppose, and enjoying it together. Definitely.
Yeah, I love that.
That's really good. So
Yeah.
basically, making sure meetings are meaningful, then communicating about communicating. I love that.
That is great. I mean, just to interrupt, but like different kind of working styles, like you'll sort of figure things out connecting with me, so it'll be like in the moment and we'll have a conversation, whereas I'm much more, I actually need to like go and have some kind of time alone to think it through in my head to know what my take is on that, and then I can come and then add. So it's like quite good. It's good to help us to understand that. So where you say it's helpful if you say to somebody, I'd like to discuss this matter, for me that would be great, because then I can go, okay, I need to make some time to just mull this over in my head, and then I can come to that like prepared.
Great. And I love the last bit that you said, that just to have
Joy.
fun, because I very often forget about it and I just get into like doing mode. It's like do. So it's I love that. All right, Nicki, because I don't want to take too much or more of your time, but what if somebody wanted to work with you today? How can they connect with you? How can they find you?
Absolutely. So the best place to start is my website, which is nickicoe.com. And there I've got all my kind of different coaching layouts, got all those resources that I mentioned to you. I also run a content series called Confessions of a Co-founder, like an agony aunt style newsletter series. So people can submit their anonymous challenges, questions, and I answer those sort of as warmly and in as much detail as I can to help them. So that can be a great way to kind of get a sense of the support and what that could look like. So reach out to me there. I'm also quite active on LinkedIn. I love to sort of share parts of my journey, as well as lots of different frameworks and advice for co-founders. So yeah, hopefully a few different ways to engage and see how I can help.
So first of all, I wanted to thank you so much, Nicki. It was a really pleasant conversation, very insightful. Absolutely loved all of the things that you mentioned today.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure meeting and chatting to you, and I feel like I've learned a few tips for us, so that's great, really helpful.
Definitely.
Yeah.
If you guys listening to this and you're enjoying this episode, please like and subscribe to our channel. You also can connect with us on LinkedIn and other social media channels. And finally, you can go to buildinggreattech.com for more guides and tips on how to make your tech business more profitable and user-focused. Thanks so much, and see you next time.